This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast. This is episode number 87. I am Craig. He is Chris. Hello, Chris.
How you doing?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I'm doing well.
Good. Because today we're going to be revisiting an old topic, but from a little different angle. In fact, the opposite angle. So today we're talking about how much it costs an owner-operator, or, you could blow that up to a multi-truck company. How much does it cost to sit for a day? I thought this was a really interesting question, and we've talked about this sort of thing before, but you've got a little bit different take on it today, right?
Yeah, so when we talked about it before, it was episode 36. If you haven't listened to it, or it's been a while since you've listened to it, and if you're anything like me, you can't really remember, what you did an hour ago.
Yeah.
So, probably wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe listen to that episode too, either before or after this one. But in episode 36, we were kind of looking at it from the standpoint of, is it better for me to sit and wait for a day to get a better rate, or is it better to take a lower rate and get the wheels rolling today? And basically, we figured out that, the math told us that if you've got a 2-day load and you sit for 1 day and then run for 2 days versus just, running for 2 days, you basically need to get 50 cents a mile more to make it worth sitting
for
waiting
a day
for a higher rate. Yeah.
Okay.
On a 3-day load, it's more like 25 cents a mile higher rate. And on a 4-day load, it was like 16 cents a mile higher to make it worth sitting that full day waiting for a better paying load.
Right.
And so what we were doing is really kind of looking at it from the front end of the load.
So
today,
as in picking it up before you go pick
yeah.
up the load, is it worth it to wait, or how much does it cost to wait? Okay.
Yeah. And so on this one, we're actually going to kind of look at it from the back end and take a little bit different twist on it, talk about it a little bit different. We're going to talk about kind of more net income, talk a little bit about that. So it should be good.
Okay.
And they're good episodes to probably listen together.
All right. Well, yeah. So you said it was episode 36.
Yep.
All right. So yeah, people can go check that out if they haven't before. I think you summed up some of the main points, but there's some intricacies that we talked about in that episode that would be worth checking out. So before we get into that topic, I do want to remind people to go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com for full show notes and to comment on these episodes and to tell Chris, what a good idea it was for him to shave for this episode.
I didn't shave today.
Well, I mean, I'm just remembering the handlebar mustache and, the facial hair of yours.
Relatively clean shaven.
So, please go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com for all of that. You can also find us on Facebook. We would love to see you there as well. Just search Haulin Assets, no G. You'll find it just fine.
This is actually a good episode to go look at the show notes, because I've got a table in the show notes that kind of shows the numbers for an example that we're going to talk a little bit about as part of this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. So, Chris, I do have to ask you, because we kind of skipped it. We went right into what we're going to be talking about today. But any tales from the road? Because we need to be regaled before we can kind of buckle down and be serious and do our work here.
Well, if you need to be regaled, I got a good story for you.
All right.
I still haven't been out on the truck for a while, but I was kind of out in the truck.
Okay.
We've got a motorhome, a big diesel pusher motorhome, and we'd gone down to Lake Powell for a family vacation. We're driving, and I was pulling my parents' boat with the motorhome. So I mean, with the boat and everything,
you're getting a grand total of what, 3 miles to the gallon on that thing,
like that.
ish.
It's
maybe
about what a semi gets, not much different. And so I'm pulling the boat, and this is about a 5.5 hour drive, and we actually got all the way back, and it was late at night. I think we got to my parents' house about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and dropping the boat off. Drop the boat off at their house and start driving again. Get back on the freeway, just driving along. We're literally one exit away from our exit, and all of a sudden I see red and blue lights in the back.
Oh boy.
And I'm like, I look down at my speed because it's like driving a semi. You know you're not speeding because I'm going under the speed limit.
Right.
And I'm like, I haven't made any lane changes. What the heck am I getting pulled over for? So
wait. Sorry. Where were you again? You said you're on your way down to Lake Powell, but like, was this in a heavily populated area? Were you out in the sticks?
it was out north of Ogden, Utah. So it's on I-15 north of Ogden, Utah. Just
in the exurbs.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to get an idea of where you are. Okay. So
if you've ever delivered to the Associated Foods in Ogden, Utah, big warehouse, I was literally like right half a mile from that.
Okay. All right. Picture painted.
Yeah,
so go on. Okay. Now
so
red and blue lights.
I get pulled over and I'm trying to rack my brain for what the heck I'm getting pulled over for. And so I stop, the police officer comes up, and I can't remember what he said exactly, but he's like, do you know you don't have your lights on? I'm like, yeah, rookie mistake, right? I'm like, my lights are on. And then I look down at the dial, and
they were not.
Guess what? My lights were not on.
So wait, what time of night was this?
It was pitch black.
Oh,
this was
gosh.
Late at night. But you know what? The freaking running lights on that motorhome are bright. Like I sat there and played with it. Like I switched from from off to on to off to on, and you can't really tell the difference.
Yeah.
The difference is in the back because you don't have brake lights or park lights on. But like looking down the road, I could still see just fine.
Yeah.
And this is a new motorhome to us. We bought it this spring. And we're actually living in it full time.
Oh.
I don't know if I've told you the story, but we're living in the motorhome.
Yeah.
So we took up roots and went for a little vacation, but so I'm not super familiar with it. In fact, this trip I think was the first time I kind of really drove it at night, and I could not believe how bright the brights are on that thing.
Yeah.
So the LEDs, the daytime running lights, are like regular headlights. Like I could see just fine. But anyway, so yeah, make sure you turn on your.
Did he ticket you?
He didn't. He was super. He didn't even ask for my driver's license registration. Wow. He asked me if I've been drinking.
That's funny. Well, I feel like, Chris, there may be an actual lesson here, and that's know your equipment.
Yeah,
right.
There you go.
Like this isn't just a worthless story. Know your equipment.
Don't be stupid.
Well, there's that
know
too.
Know your equipment. That sounds like a podcast episode title right there.
Exactly. No, I mean, seriously, like you grab a new truck, you're so excited, you just bought your first truck, or maybe, your second truck, it's a brand new thing, you're so excited to get out on the road. Well, it might be worth your time to take a day and learn that equipment. Actually, I don't know if I dare say this out loud, but read the owner's manual.
Oh, yuck.
I know. But I guess point just being, it pays off, right?
It is kind of important to know your equipment. It is kind of critical.
So that leads us into our topic for today. Like I said, it may behoove you to take a day and learn your equipment before you go out on the road with it. But how much are you going to lose? Of course, you're talking about on the back end of it. So we talked about the front end. How much would it cost you to sit for a day? And that was episode 36. But take us into this topic, Chris.
So this is this kind of happens to every trucking company out there. It happens to us on occasion, and this is kind of a topic I've been thinking about doing for a little while. And to kind of jump into it, have I ever told you what frustrates me the most about trucking?
Oh, I just hope I'm not involved in this answer, but no, I don't think you
should ask me.
Okay. Hey, Chris, I got a question for you. What frustrates you the most about trucking?
Well, there's a lot of things that frustrate me the most about trucking, but one of the biggest things are shippers and receivers.
Okay.
Life would be so much less complicated, and the frustration level would just be a lot less if you didn't have to deal with shippers and receivers. But the reality is,
you do.
You have to deal with them.
Something about making money and actually shipping goods. You need the shippers and receivers. Okay, so what do you mean?
There's lots of issues that kind of come along with them, but one of the biggest ones is you just have to live by their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can do no wrong. Like they can't be late, they can't be early, they can't but
right.
You can get into trouble for being early. You can get into trouble for being late. And
Let me ask you this. Is this still as much a concern now with the shortage of drivers and trucks out on the road as it would have been, a few years ago?
I think in some ways, I think it's slightly better. In some ways, I think it's worse. Like you take, for example, because there is such a shortage right now in trucks, a lot of places are just grateful to get their stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think in some ways they're a little bit more, they don't throw as big of a fit if you're late because they know that they just don't have a lot of other trucking companies they can go to.
Right. This is, by the way, people, not an excuse to be bad at your job.
Don't.
So
yeah, absolutely. It's
still be on
it's
time.
Not worth it. But the other, in some ways it's worse because their schedules are messed up. Like they are making you wait longer because they don't have staff and it's just so there's lots of problems that way.
Yeah. Okay. So So this is the thing that annoys you the most.
Yeah.
What can you do about it?
There's not a whole lot you can do about it. There's one thing that I think you can do, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on going down the road. But one of the things that really frustrates me about shippers and they kind of, and it's really probably as much or more receivers than it is shippers, but they just kind of rule that schedule, right? They get to dictate it. And what ends up happening is there's a lot of shippers out there or receivers out there like the Walmarts, the US Foods, the bigger the warehouse, the bigger the place, the more likely they are to be a little bit of a problem.
Really? That's so interesting to me. I would have thought it would be the opposite.
Well, and the reason is because those guys, they're really concerned about the efficiency of their business. So the last thing, if a truck shows up late, it messes with their schedule, right?
Right.
Because they had dedicated resources to unload that truck at that time.
Right.
And he didn't show up, and so it makes them inefficient. And so to avoid them being inefficient, what do? They
make you inefficient.
They make us inefficient by adding an extra day of transit time so that if something happens on the road, you're, you've got some time to get it fixed and still, makes it more likely that you're going to show up to your appointment on time.
Yeah.
So they make themselves more efficient, which makes carriers less efficient because then, what should just be a 4-day job turns out to be a 5-day job. And that obviously causes lots of problems. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is, is it worth it to take a load that's going to give you kind of an extra day at the end of the run where you're just kind of sitting because you had plenty of time to get there. You got there early and now you just have to sit and wait until your appointment.
I see. Okay. So you're on a load, say, to Walmart. I mean, I don't mean to pick on Walmart. We'll just use a big
Walmart's
receiver.
a good example of that. They're notorious for adding that extra day into their routes.
Got it. So I see. So what's happening is they're giving you 5 days to make the trip. It's only taking you 4, and they won't unload you until your scheduled time on that 5th day.
Walmart is a perfect example. Like if you can't show up early, they will fine you if you show up more than half an hour early.
Really?
For your appointment.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of
you're stuck.
Wow.
You have no choice.
Okay. So is it even? Well, I mean, we're going to talk about what you can do to mitigate that or how much it costs you. But no. I mean, I guess this is how we get into it. Is it worth it? Do you even take that load?
That's a good question.
I guess that's what it comes down to.
That's what
right?
we want to answer at the end. So I don't want to, no spoiler alerts. We've got a little lead up to answer that question, but that's the question that we basically want to answer in this episode.
Okay. All right.
But to get into that and to kind of lead into it, there's a few things that you've got to consider. And there's some things that you want to consider when accepting a load like that. And one of the biggest things I think is the different types of drivers that you've got.
Okay. Including yourself.
Including myself. So I've kind of, for the sake of this conversation, want to categorize drivers into 3 categories. You've got the guy that's slow, that either can't wake his ass up in time and isn't able to, doesn't start driving on time, and so they just constantly and consistently are running late.
Okay.
Right? Then you've got the guys, and this is probably where a lot of the truckers, the drivers, the category that they fall into, they're just steady. Like they want to put on, between 550 and 600 miles a day, which let's just say between 500 and 600 miles a day, which is a very doable run for most of the country.
Yeah.
To do that amount, 500 or 600 miles in a day. They're not winning any records for the most mileage, but they're doing decent. It's good. And then you've got the guys that are just hard runners that want to run between 600 and 700 miles in a day, and just are constant go, go, go. Like they drive their 11 hours, they take their 10-hour break, and at 9 hours and 59 minutes, they're sitting in the seat of their truck ready to go.
Yeah. As
soon as that 10th hour clicks, they're on the road again. And that's a hard lifestyle. Most guys don't want to do that. I mean, that's how I drove when I was driving, and it is hard to do. I did it for a year. I can't imagine. I mean, there's guys out there that just do this day in, day out, year after year after year, and that's really hard to do because you basically don't have a whole lot of a life. You're working and resting. That's about all you do.
Right. And hey, if you got the personality for it, that's one thing. But I think a lot of people would probably want to split the difference between type 2 and 3, right?
Yeah. And so if you've got that steady driver, especially a steady driver that's maybe a little bit lower on that range of miles, that 500 to 600 miles a day, 550 to 600, that fifth day might be okay. It may take them 4.5 days to get there, and so they're only sitting for half a day. Not a huge deal. But you get one of those guys that's a hard runner that is running that 700 miles a day. They've gotten there in 4 days, and now they're just sitting.
Yeah.
So it may make sense to take that Walmart load if you've got a driver that kind of wants to stretch that run out a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
But then for a guy that's a runner, you probably don't want to, because he's just going to end up sitting for a day, which isn't good for you as a trucking company, and it's not good for the driver, because the driver, they're out on the road. They want to be running and making money.
Right. And so you give them the rush orders, maybe, whatever, not the Walmarts.
So you need to take that into consideration when you're kind of doing your load planning and deciding whether you want to take a load or not.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you're taking this into consideration, and you're planning your individual driver's loads, and you probably did this for yourself as well. You kind of understood what type of driver you were, and so you knew when you were driving the truck, okay, I'm not going to take that load because I'm just going to sit for 12 hours at the end of it, and I'm losing money. How much money would you have been losing when you were driving the truck?
That's a great question. And so let's look at, I've kind of gone through some of the Haulin assets loads and kind of what we've done over the last several years, and looking at kind of what our revenue per day was. On the spreadsheet that I use, I kind of track the revenue per day.
This is per day on the road.
Per day
right?
on the road.
Okay.
So right now, with rates as good as they are in 2021, our revenue per load, especially in the latter half of 2021, is pretty dang close to $1,500 a day.
Whoa.
So
okay. That's pretty good.
That's the total revenue. That's per truck. Yep, per day per truck. When the truck's on the road and moving, that's roughly what it's making in a day.
Okay.
In 2021 or 2020, so last year, about the same time last year, it was closer to $1,150. So that's about a $350 a day difference.
Okay.
But in 2019, it was more like $1,050. And that was when I was running really hard, doing that, drive 11 hours, 10 hours off, drive 11 hours, 10 hours off. Most guys aren't going to do that. And so if you take that into consideration, 2 years ago, it was probably more like $950 a day.
And that was at a time when, as I recall, rates weren't as good as they are now.
Correct. You
were a brand new authority, and so you couldn't get the same kind of loads that maybe you could now. So there's a lot of factors that went into it, right?
There is.
Yeah.
And so now let's take a little bit of a step back, and I want to talk a little bit about profit margin.
Okay.
Have we talked about profit margin before?
Is that a step back, or is that a hard right turn?
Probably that's a better analogy. Hard right turn.
Profit margin. I mean, we've talked about profit, but I don't know if we've talked specifically about profit margin. What do you want to talk about?
And we may not have. I'd be surprised if we haven't, but I think it's one way or another, it's probably worth a refresher, even if we have talked a little bit about it. But the profit margin is basically the percentage of money that makes it down to your bottom line, that net profit. So you've got your total revenue that comes in, that you make, what you charge a client. Then you've got all these expenses that are associated with it, money going out, expenses. Then down there at the bottom is the profit.
So, yeah, okay. So when we talk about profit, we talk about a dollar amount. But when we talk about profit margin, we're talking more like a percentage of what you're bringing in that you get to keep.
Yep.
So like restaurants are famous for having razor thin profit margins, right? So they're operating on a 1 or 2% profit margin, where you might have some. I used to work for a marketing company that had just a sky high, like 20% profit margin. It was crazy. So that's what we're getting at?
That's exactly what we're getting at. And kind of like you're alluding to, profit margins vary greatly from one industry to another industry.
Right.
Marketing's one that typically has a little bit higher profit margins. Tech companies usually have some of the highest profit margins. They can even get into like the 40 and 50%, which just blows my mind. But then you've got companies that have, high assets, trucking companies being one of them, that typically have lower profit margins. And in the trucking industry, obviously you have guys that lose money, so you have guys with zero profit margins.
Or negative.
Or negative, yeah. But in reality, like the good trucking companies probably get somewhere between 10 and 20%. Probably more of them closer to that 10%.
Yeah.
Than
Still,
20, but
that's not bad.
An owner operator that's really controlling their overhead, doesn't have a whole lot of overhead, they can get into that 20% profit margin range. And so the way that you figure that out is, if you take, for example, if you've got $100,000 in total revenue, and then you've got all your expenses, say you've got $80,000 of expenses, then you have $20,000 of profit left over. You just take that $20,000, divide it by the $100,000, and that will give you your profit margin.
Yeah. So in this case, it's a very easy 20%. Yeah. 20 out of 100. Okay. So good. So where do we go from there?
So from there, let's talk. So if you think about it, if you've got that revenue per day of what we're bringing in 2021 of $1,500 per truck, and this is kind of oversimplifying things a little bit, but it's good for our analogy, and it's fairly accurate, fairly close. If we've got a 10% profit margin, how much is our essentially profit a day per truck?
Right. On that $1,500, we should be getting $150 in net profit. Okay.
Exactly. And so that's what you kind of think. Okay, so if my truck has to sit for a day, as the trucking company, I'm losing $150 in profit margin.
In profit. Yeah.
Yep. So
you got to do some fancy math. Chris, are we doing spreadsheets?
I've got spreadsheets and math in this one. Yet.
You know what?
I knew you were going to hate it. I was hoping to sweep it under the rug and you wouldn't notice, but look at you go.
Yeah,
you're on the ball.
I'm sitting here. I'm looking at my notes. I'm scrolling down. Oh, graph. Oh, no, it's a graph. Oh, but this is what you were talking about. People can go check out this particular graph.
Yeah, they can check out this table.
At HaulinAssetsLLC.com. Please go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com.
Okay, we're gonna do an example, because like what we were talking about with the margins, roughly if you're getting a 10% margin off of $150 or a $1,500 a day revenue, you should get about $150 in profit. Right. So if you're sitting for a day, you're probably losing out on that. And to make things worse, your driver is sitting and not moving. And so not only is the company losing out on net income, but the driver's losing out on a wage. And so really nobody's going to be happy except for
the receiver,
because they're staying efficient.
They get their load on time. So who cares?
Even though the driver's not efficient, the carrier's not efficient.
Yeah. So what's our fancy math here? So we've got $150 a day. So are we going to use the same example that we had before? It's a 4-day trip, but a 5-day load.
Yep.
Right. So you got that day extra. So how does the math work out?
So the math works out if you've got a 4-day load. So a 4-day load is going to get you roughly $6,000, we'll say.
Right. Okay.
$150 of net income a day. And so that comes down to about $600 of profit.
Okay. And that's okay. So that's a 4-day trip, 4-day load.
Yep. 4-day trip. But it's taking you 5 days. So on day 5, that truck's just sitting.
I'm working on our baseline. So our baseline is we have a 4-day trip, 4-day load. And so we don't have any downtime. We made $600 in net profit.
Yeah, the problem with this one is you can't really compare the same 4-day load with the same gross profit to the 5-day, because typically if you're going to have a 5-day load, I'm talking about an efficient 5-day load where you're, essentially having to drive all 5 days. You're not going to make it.
I see.
Right?
Okay.
So my point is with this, and you can kind of see this from the table. So hopefully everybody can have a chance as they're listening to the podcast to pull up this table that's in the show notes. But if you look at it, so the 4-day load where you get paid $6,000 for, those 4 days you're making pretty good money, but then you're having to sit that 5th day, because say it's one of those 600 miles a day. In 4 days you should be able to go 2,400 miles. So it's a 2,400 mile run, but it doesn't deliver till the 5th day, so you're sitting on that 5th day. On the next example, you've got a 5-day load, and this one I've actually made it so it's not quite as profitable to prove the point. So on this one, you only get paid $7,000 total.
Okay.
But you're getting $1,000 more, but you're having to drive an extra day.
Okay.
But even though your profit margin, your rate per mile is going to be lower, your profit margin is going to be a little bit lower. In this case, instead of $150 a day, you're getting $140 of profit. The margin's the same, but the amount of profit's different. It's lower. So basically, in that situation, spread out over 5 days, you get $700 of net income instead of $600 of net income.
Okay.
And so even though your rate per mile is lower, your revenue per day is lower, your net income per day is lower, in the grander scheme of things, you're going to make more money on that load than you are on the load where you have to sit for a day.
Okay.
And on top of that, your driver is going to be happier because they're going to make more money.
Sure.
So it's a win-win for everybody.
So, and if you don't mind, Chris, I want to take this opportunity because a lot of what you just said, I'm sitting here looking at the graph and I'm like, okay, I think I get what you're saying. So people can go check out the graph at haulinassetsllc.com, but they can also go to motorcarrierhq.com, motorcarrierhq.com. I want to make sure I said that right, because there's calculators and tools and whatnot, and ultimately a phone number where if somebody's just starting out and they're like, I need to figure out how these numbers work and how to calculate this, people can get help with this.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So I know it's a bit of a shameless commercial plug and all that stuff, but one of the companies that you run, Motor Carrier HQ, helps people with exactly this thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, because I'm sitting here looking at the chart and I'm like, I'm a little lost. I'm not sure I totally get it. So I want to make sure people know that there are more tools out there to help understand a concept like this.
And sometimes, because I do this all the time, a concept seems relatively simple to me when it's really not for somebody that this is a first time too, or they're kind of first time looking at it. So, the point is, and this is for the most part, a pretty cut and dry point. You never want to have your truck sitting for a day. So if you've got somebody that you look at how your driver likes to drive, and because you can only make as much money as trucks that you have running down the road, and drivers are really, especially these days, are what dictate what size of fleet you can have, because you have to be able to keep a driver in the seat of essentially most all of your vehicles, your trucks.
Right.
So you want to make sure drivers are happy. So in a situation like with most of my drivers, we try to find good drivers, and then we try to find a happy medium of how they like to drive and match that up. So we've got some of those that are, the slow to steady, and we've got some that are runners. And so if I've got a slow to steady guy that is otherwise a great driver for me, I'm going to put him on loads that match the time frame of how he likes to travel.
Right,
so if he likes
style.
to do 550 miles a day, I'm going to find loads that allow him to do 550 miles a day. If I've got one of those drivers that's a hard runner and wants to do 700 miles a day, I'm not going to put him on a load that you can do in 4 days.
Right.
That's going to not deliver for the 5th day, because that's just going to make them upset, and it's not good for me as the company either. the guy that same load might be good for a different driver.
Right.
But it's not going to be good for those runners. And that's what you really need to keep a watch out for. If you've got a runner driver, you don't want them, essentially driving for 4 days and then sitting for a fifth.
Yeah.
And so you may be better off saying, hey, this load it's got a good rate per mile. Everything really looks good on it. But with this driver, he's going to end up sitting for a full day or close to a full day. I'm going to go find another load that more matches his style. It's going to make the driver more money, and it's going to make me as a company more money.
Right. So do we have a number then? The question that we're asking here is how much does it cost to sit for a day? And I mean, I know it's going to depend on the load, on the amount that you're getting, the revenue that you're getting from that load. But were you able to calculate like how to decide, okay, this is the actual number that I'm...
So I would say for Haulin Assets today, it's costing us $1,500 in total revenue, and our net, I haven't calculated our net income or percentage for this year. I would assume it's probably somewhere between 15 and 20%. So I would say it's costing us $150 or $1,500 in total revenue, and probably somewhere between $200 and $300 in net income and profit.
Yeah.
For having a truck sit.
Wow, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's you don't want to have it sit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very good. I mean, I feel like that's the ultimate wrap up, right? You don't want to let it sit.
Don't let your truck sit. The only caveat to that would be is also don't force a driver to run faster than they really want to run.
Than they're comfortable doing.
Because one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to push that driver to where they want to quit, or you're going to get frustrated with the driver because they're not running as much as you want them to do. So that's why, like, part of the screening the driver process is so important. You want to make sure you guys understand each other and you're on the same page. And if the driver only wants to run 550 to 600 miles a day, but you've kind of worked it out that you want all your drivers doing 700 miles a day, you probably shouldn't hire that driver.
Right.
But if you're okay with a driver, taking a little bit of extra time, because at least you've got a seat, or a button that seat, that truck's moving and it's making money, it's doing well. It might not be 100% maximized as far as profits go, but if it's a good driver, you don't have to worry about. They don't cause you a lot of problems. In my book, that's a driver worth keeping, even if they're not making as much money in that vehicle as they possibly can, because it's hard to find drivers these days. It's always hard. It's exceptionally hard right now, but it's always hard. So I'll typically err in the side of caution with the driver and do something that's good enough for me and keeps the driver happy.
Way to wrap it up. That's perfect. I would ask for an impact tip, but I feel like we kind of got one at the beginning, right? Know your equipment.
Know your equipment. There you go.
So
that is a good impact tip.
So anything else that we want to do to wrap this topic up, Chris? Or are you feeling like we're good for today?
I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay, good. So yeah, once again, I mean, I know this is like the third time, but HaulinAssetsLLC.com, you can see the chart that Chris is talking about. You can go to MotorCarrierHQ.com to get the tools and calculators and that sort of thing. Actually, Chris, now that we're kind of wrapping up the end of the episode, can I tell you something that I didn't know we could do on HaulinAssetsLLC.com? So I went there today. I was checking out some old episodes because, that's what I do. Oh, no. Okay, so go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com. If I can type correctly. Anyway,
you can't type and keep your mouth in front of the mic at the same time.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah,
challenging.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, so you can go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com and go to Get Started. And I don't even know if you knew you could do this, but you can go to Get Started, and there are categories that people can check out. So I'm looking at Start Your Own Trucking Company, and there are episodes that we've done that are categorized in that. So, things like DOT numbers, MC authority, how much does it cost to start a trucking company, that sort of thing. You go down to seeing the numbers, and you can see all of our financials episodes. We do one of those every month. And so if people just want to see, kind of chart the journey financially of Haulin Assets,
they can filter it out that way. That's good.
It's really cool. So anyway, I found this today and I thought it was really cool and I wanted to make sure people knew about it. So there's that. I also want to encourage people to go there and make your voice heard on the show notes. If you've made it this far into the episode, then we know you're a true fan, right? And what we would like to do is have you go on there. If you're listening to the sound of my voice, go check out the website and give us suggestions of things, of topics that you are curious about, because we've got, a pile of topics that we'll cover, but we want to make sure that we're covering the questions that people have. And so we would love not only for you to respond to these episodes that we do, but also give us ideas of stuff you want us to cover in the future. You can do that at HaulinAssetsLLC.com or on Facebook. So yeah, Chris, what do you think?
I think that's great. Yeah, I'd love to get more suggestions. We've got a few that are in the hopper that clients have given us, but yeah, we're always looking for a few more.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Chris, for coming in, and I guess we'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you then.